The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hi folks, just clicking over the top of the hour now, so we'll get ourselves underway with this ERP Insights Roundtable. My name's Hayden McCall and I run iStart Technology and Business magazine, and well, we have a few websites and e-newsletters, and we run the odd webinar as well. So welcome today and thanks for joining. Just as people are filing in the door, I see there's the numbers rapidly piling in. We'll go through a little bit of housekeeping. Well, obviously today we've assembled a very esteemed panel. We summed it up, and there's about 60 years of ERP implementation and selection experience around the table, so obviously has attracted a good audience today, so thanks to everyone. Sponsored today by our friends at Epicor, so thanks to them for making this happen. For everyone, you do not need to take notes as we go through. There'll be a recording that comes out via there's an email that will come out tomorrow with a link to it, so you can go through it at your leisure, or focus in on the bits that you find particularly useful. We're aiming for about 40 minutes of presentation. We've got a series of questions that we'll put to the panelists. There's a bit of material to get through, so whether we hit that or not, we'll hopefully, if the facilitator does his job, we'll stick to that and wrap up inside the hour, but leaving plenty of time for questions and answers. Keen to get your questions answered, so please do engage. There's a questions pane within the little sidebar that you get with GoToWebinar, so use that. Once we get into Q&A, I'll show you how to do that. But introducing today the panelists, Barry Carruth coming in from Wellington today, a fairly breezy day down in Wellington, and he's on his way up to Auckland where it's rainy. Good old New Zealand weather doesn't change. Barry runs Probity Consulting across Auckland and Wellington. He's involved in systems procurement, evaluation, consulting on technology, business case preparation, and the full sort of project support services right through to M&A support. G'day, Barry. Are you there, Barry?
Good afternoon, everybody.
Fantastic. All right.
Yep.
Next one is, yes, got you, Barry. Thank you. Next one is Greg Thompson, based in Perth.
Cool.
Greg is presently with the Present Group, which is he's in a consulting role within that company. They've just implemented a ERP in there, and he's been supporting that process of selection and implementation, and still doing work for the Present Group. But he's been doing multiple implementations on the customer side over the last 15 years, and has worked with several of the ERP vendors in that process. G'day, Greg.
Hello everyone, glad to be here.
Good to hear your voice, Greg, all the way from WA. And lastly, Jamin Johnson is with Solution Minds, also in Perth. Seems to be a bit of a Western Australian skew on things today, but I'm sure their contribution will be valuable to everyone east of there. 20 plus years of consulting in this space, big chunk of that time with Anderson and Deloitte Consulting, and a rather long list of software implementation projects under his belt. So thanks for joining us, Jamin. How are you?
Yeah, good night everyone.
Excellent. So we have 3 live voices on the line. So we'll get into it. As I said, questions for today. Just open up the little questions pane on your sidebar, and just type in where it says enter a question for staff. Just type away in there. I'll see those as they come in, and I'll pose them in the Q&A session at the end. All right, without further ado, and accompanied with a bit of Dilbert cartoonism, as is appropriate in this space, just to keep you sort of focused on your screens, we're going to go through each question. I'll pose it to one of the panelists, and then we'll open it to the round table for discussion. So Barry's going to pick up this one to get us going. What are some of the key factors involved in constructing a business case for an ERP project, Barry?
Okay, so I suppose based on our experience, the vast majority of organisations today understand what the content of a business case should be, and most organisations have got a template approach to actually preparing one. Our experience has been that a number of these documents, although they are complete, the quality of the content itself is somewhat subject. And one of the biggest oversights that we have found is our business cases just don't address the issue of understanding the impacts on an organisation during and post the go live of the ERP solution. So it's just two quick factors. The business cases tend to omit the impact on the business of taking key people out of business as usual and placing them into the project. And the other factor that they seem to omit on a frequent basis is understanding the staffing requirements and the organisational structure requirements of the business post-go-live and the costs required to put that new structure and those new people in place. So most of the issue really is around having a good QA process, understanding the assumptions that have been made and documenting those assumptions in the business case. So it's just a bit of a view for an opener.
Yeah, I guess, I mean, I've certainly seen it where the business case has not been really recognised as a planning document, but it's the ultimate foundation stone. It is certainly the experience I've seen. Jamin, do you want to comment on that?
I think Barry made some really good points. Just to add to it, I would say it's really important to be realistic as possible up front, set those expectations with management. If they haven't been through ERP projects before, I would err on the side of being prudent and extend time a little bit, give yourself some contingency in terms of timing, which drives costs, as Barry said, around the internal resourcing as well, around backfill and so on. I put plenty of fat in there really initially to cope with scope changes, because generally the business case is done up front, potentially before you've done a system selection, but definitely after you've done a system selection when you know your partner, but you may not have engaged them yet for the scoping study. So, without that really detailed understanding, the business case is likely to fluctuate. So I would say put quite a bit of cost and time contingency in there.
Yeah, great. And Greg, anything to add to the business case phase?
Yeah, for me, the business case is a tough one because many of the processes are complex, and it is difficult to for many processes to actually put an ROI type case up. And so it's probably two things. One is to take a long-term view. I know it's hard in some businesses, but you can't be thinking of return on investment in 6-12 months. It's further out than that, and you'll notice 2 years out you'll think how did we used to do things, because in the business case I think you've got to factor in the fact that to grow to any size you just need it. Once you get above village size, you're really struggling on small systems, and I've got a few examples of that, where one company was they reckon the biggest in the world running on QuickBooks. They were struggling, and because they had reached this, they were more than a village. Some people say it's about 150. They were over 200 and struggling, but after the implementation, they were wondering how they used to do things because it was just a new way. So that factor that it just needs to be done if you want to grow needs to be in the business case as well.
Yeah, Barry, but just back to you. I guess the customer of a business case is a key thing. Who are you producing these things for? I guess the CFO probably has maybe producing it themselves, but who are they producing it for? Is it the board? Is it the initiation stakeholder team? What's the audience?
Well, there are a number of audiences. I think the one that needs to be top of mind for most large organisations is the investment committee, who make the decisions about what projects get priority and what projects get funding. And their processes are usually quite robust these days, and they will examine business cases in great detail before approving them. So this again gets back to the comments that the other presenters have made about ensuring that the quality of the content's there, but also the fact that you've built in a little bit of contingency for the unknown factors. After that, after your investment committee, you've got your steering committee and you've got your project owner. Again, key people who will take an interest in the content of the business case. And then after that, unfortunately, the business case is often stuck on a shelf and forgotten. And I think in reality it needs to come out again sometime during the project, particularly at the end, and say, well, we identified all these business benefits that we were going to get through this project. Have we actually achieved them? And it should be used at a later stage of the project as a kind of check-off to make sure that what was going to be delivered has been delivered, the scope of the project has been delivered, and the benefits have been delivered as well.
Yeah.
So it's a document that has a life, but for many organisations it gets shelved after it's been approved.
Yeah, I think there's probably some nodding heads in the audience. All right, great. So, Greg, next one up. Just moving into the next slide, talking about project management and kind of framing up the project and setting expectations and setting a budget in place for the project. Business case obviously is a contributor to that, but what's your experience of pulling in all of the moving parts that make it happen?
Yes, there's there's a lot being written on this type of point. So I'll just give my views from my experience and let you do the reading from all the boffins from the universities. But so I just got about 4 or 5 points on each of the internal expectations and the budget. I'll just run through that. In terms of expectations, it's one I think is top management. It's top management actions, not just verbal support or anything. They've got to actually, people actually see how top managers react and champion these things. I've got a really good example, a recent one, where a regional manager, didn't think it was his job, and so therefore no one in that region did it, and we struggled for ages. So, top management actions are really important. So that has to be taken into account before, and top managers need to sign on to this process, and I'll get onto that in later questions. Management time, Barry mentioned it. It's really important, not just the project team, which I mentioned, but it's the role and the time of key managers in making decisions around process, and it does take a considerable amount of non-project members' time. Project members, the team is really important, both in terms of the type of person that you pick and how you backfill their roles, because if you've got more than 10 people in the company, then the role needs to be full-time, whether it's one person that does everything, whether for a small company or a team. Time and time again, I've gone in after companies have tried to implement with part-time resources. I haven't really heard of one that's actually worked, so that's a major consideration. Also, the team, they need to be the right type of people. Sometimes it's not a pleasant experience implementing ERPs, although you'd like it to be, and so your people have to be very resilient. There can be some tough times, and they need to be able to handle that and not project it out onto outside the team. Other thing is that we need to be very clear on the scope, and ERP implementations are the old thing. It's not a destination; it's a journey. It's just the start. Once you go live, it's just the start, and so make the original go live maybe as small as possible in some cases, because it is disruptive, and so make the scope as tight and control the scope, and you need mechanisms to be able to do that. And the last point, probably the most important one, is understand processes. So before you start, you need to understand what that entails. And in my experience, when I started, some years ago, there was the methodology was, map your to-be and then map your as-is, and then 6 months later you can start thinking about implementing an ERP, and then that went out of fashion because it was just seen by, maybe as a fee grab by consultants, and so we were implementing without understanding the as-is processes, and that brought about a whole host of downstream issues. So I think the thinking's going back to, because the tools have got a lot better. You need to understand your current processes. So, and in making them visible, people can understand the true scale of what the issues are. And I'll talk more about processes further down track. But understanding the process is probably the most important thing that you need to do when implementing the process, implementing an ERP.
Yeah, great.
Budget side?
Yep.
Yeah, sorry?
Carry on. No, just saying there's just some comments from the audience. The screen does look like it's doing some strange things. Sorry about that. I just have tried to fix it up. We did practice beforehand and it was fine, but there looks like some presentation of my PowerPoint screen. But hey, listen to the questions. Hopefully you can read what the questions are. The Dilbert looks like it's bouncing off the screen a bit, but sorry about that. Greg, carry on.
Yeah. Okay, and then just on the budget side, and again, lots been written about budgeting, so I won't worry about licensing costs. You would have sorted that out, the consulting costs. One word on the consultant, though, is once you've decided on your software, my experience is then it's really a personal interview to get the right consultants, because you're not, what you're looking for is individual consultants who not only know the software, but can relate that to your specific business. So it's like a personal, it's like you're employing someone, and don't just allow a vendor to assign consultants thinking they're all the same, because they are not. So and if you do that, your budget, your costs for consultants will balloon, because you'll have to change them out. But and Barry's mentioned the internal labour and expenses. I wouldn't underestimate that. There's a fair bit of internal time, and it's not just office hours. But there's a couple of areas that I have experienced in almost all, even though it's, you probably wouldn't say this at the outset, but you need to factor in that there may be an impact on cash flow come go live if your go live is involved getting an invoice out, because there will be some issues. Some implementations a lot less than others, but just make sure that the client understands that there may be an impact, and they have got some movement in their cash flow around go live. And I mentioned before, for your budget, phase 1 is just the start. So think about phase 2 and 3. That's about it.
Yeah, good stuff. There's a lot of points in there, Greg, and I think all of them pretty valid. Barry, do you want to pick any up on any of those?
Yeah, I'll just expand out on one of the comments that Greg made. And the project manager is key to the success of a project. And one of the things that you should look for when you're selecting a project manager is that person able to understand who his audience is and who he or she should be, in fact, setting expectations with. I've seen a number of projects that have come close to failure because the project manager has not been able to identify who the key influences are within the business and has excluded them from the communication pool, much to the detriment of himself or herself and much to the detriment of the project. I'll just add that one in. I know that we're just keeping an eye on time, and we're 20 minutes in, so you might want to hand over to Jamin and let him have a comment as well.
Jamin, thoughts?
Thanks. Thanks, Barry. Just a couple of quick ones. In terms of expectations, my experience, done lots of selections. Heaven forbid, vendors do oversell, and they don't really factor in a lot of client-side activities. So typically, you'll get vendors in front of the selection committee. They'll be talking up how much they can implement in such a short period of time. Is generally just ERP projects do tend to go slightly over what you expect in terms of time and also budget. It's a sad indictment of our industry, but it's the fact. So you need to be wary of that up front and try to really address those expectations early on, particularly with your sponsor, the executive team. Getting a sponsor that's been through an ERP project before and understands the kind of the scale and complexity of it, I think is really important in terms of setting those expectations. He can help then convey those messages to the board as well. In terms of signing up the consultants, I completely agree with Greg on that one. What we typically do is actually interview the consultants before anything's been signed and get those people committed to the project. A lot of vendors don't like doing that. They kind of say sign first and we'll assign the consultants. You can push pretty hard. You've got leverage at that stage. So I would suggest we interview PMs, we interview consultants, just make sure that they're of the right calibre. And before a deal's been signed, the vendor's in the best position to put those really good resources forward. And just one last thing that Greg made a comment about was the cash flow impact. Completely agree with that point. There's also an impact around productivity that you need to factor in. So the call on internal resources before go live for testing and training, and also for those power users supporting other end users after go live, you need to factor in what that does to your productivity. And a bigger cash flow impact is actually not being able to produce your products or services and taking a hit on your cash that way. So you need to factor that in and backfill people so you don't take a big hit.
Yeah, it's not surprising that people hesitate launching into these projects. They're significant undertakings. When you line up all of those points that you've made, it's a significant impact on any business to take it on. So, yeah, head off to those who have done it. Okay. Good stuff, guys, and there's a few questions coming in. There's some that will be addressed. There's others that I'll go back to individually. Just one thing for the audience, we're not going to get into talking about specific ERP solutions today, talking about the topic and the process and some frameworks around what you need to do to get to that point, but we're not going to be making recommendations on which solutions are best for your business, because it's very much a strokes for folks question, that one. Okay, next up. Next through is what are some of the key factors in successfully selecting an ERP system? So Jamin, do you want to take this one? And I know you've sent me another slide through. Do you want to talk to that one, or?
No, I won't worry about that one for the moment, Hayden. I think that's a bit broader than just in terms of successful selection. That's kind of business transformation in our approach. So I'll just address this point, this question first, if I may. Some of the points that have already been raised were kind of on my list about securing the right sponsor and setting the expectations early, understanding what the drivers for change are, agreeing the objectives of the whole project up front, socialising those and getting agreement. Really the selection approach, it needs to be the right level for your business in terms of the due diligence that you need to go through and the risk mitigation. I mean, one extreme is you don't go through a process, you just choose something. Another competitor has that product, I'll just choose that. That's very, very risky. There could be massive gaps in terms of the solutions. Every business is different in terms of their objectives and requirements. So we definitely encourage a thorough process in terms of selecting the software and the partner. And we typically do that at the same time. So in parallel, choose the software for the business and also the partner. A bit of a plug for us consultants here. I do recommend strongly engaging specialists who really know the market, who deal with the vendors, who deal with the partners. That knowledge is really invaluable, and they know we know the warts and all view about the market, pros and cons of each of the vendors and partners. Further to what Greg said before about the process work, that's absolutely part of our recommended approach. document the as-is processes. You can do it really quickly. Some companies don't like it, think it's a waste of time. We've tried not doing it and jumping straight to the future state. It's quite hard for people to get their heads around. They know what they currently do. They know where the issues are. I think it's important for the whole buy-in process to do that process work up front, even if it's really rapid, to identify what they do, the issues and the opportunities, maybe the touch points with other systems. It is a valuable exercise, particularly if a business is growing organically or acquisitively, really, and they've got different processes. It's an idea to try and standardise those into a desired future state for your business in a common processes, and let that kind of guide the selection process, because you really want to choose a system that's going to support how you want to operate, not necessarily how you are operating today. We also encourage doing some investigation about other companies and competitors, what they are using in your industry. You don't really want to be on the bleeding edge. I've been there and done that, and it's not pretty in terms of a solution that's not mature for an industry. Definitely look at what others are using as a bit of a guide. You'll typically pick out 2 or 3 products that are really dominating in your space. The business scenarios part of the selection are really important in terms of, I mentioned the future state. So if you've done the process work in the future state, they drive those business scenarios. Focus on the differentiators. If you're looking for a pretty broad footprint through your ERP, you don't necessarily need to spend a huge amount of time on, say, finance, because it's pretty standard these days that the packages do things relatively similarly. So focus on maybe the more operational areas and things that really will make a difference to your business. Provide vendors with data to make the demonstrations more meaningful. We also encourage you, all of our projects, we video the demonstrations. It's a bit of risk mitigation. You might refer back to it during the implementations about representations that were made. You might actually share that with people that weren't part of the selection committee and got to see the demonstrations. So I'd strongly suggest you video them. At the back end, reference checking is absolutely critical. Do the reference checks for the vendor, for the references that the vendor provides, but also do some of your own. Some of your selection committee will know people in other businesses, so we encourage a bit of informal reference checking. It's quite insightful. Finally, just negotiate when you have the leverage, which is before you've made the decision. And finally, what we'd like to do is engage the preferred vendor and partner for kind of a detailed scoping and planning study before you buy the software, essentially. So they've given you a proposal based on scope information in your RFP, but we typically like to invite them in for anywhere from 2 to 3 months to do a detailed scoping exercise to really understand what's going to be coming out of the box, where the gaps are, refine their costs, and then you can refine your business case before you embark on the actual implementation itself. And you also get to suss out the consultants as well, and maybe want to ask for replacements if they're not right for your business. So sorry, there's a lot in there, but I think yeah, a lot of important stuff.
Yeah, there's a few questions coming through just in relation to your comments around the as-is processes, to-be process, and to what extent you try and maintain flexibility in that process, and I guess keep an open mind depending on the software you select. You might do something completely differently. How do you factor that into sort of pinning down plans and requirements?
Yeah, great question. We've grappled with this many times in the past, and I guess when you say future state, we don't actually, we call them could be. So we're not prescriptive and say it has to be this way. What we want to do is say this is a desired future state. We get the vendors to demonstrate against these future state processes, as well as showing us how their good practice inbuilt system processes work. And then ultimately, when we do decide on what the solution is going through design, then it's a negotiation process really to determine our future state versus what the system provides, where you can concede, and where you want to, you're determined to keep your maybe differentiated process or activity, and they really don't become 2D until you finish design, you get into build.
Yeah. Okay. So in terms of expressing those processes, you get a process flow charts and kind of number of use cases, but are you pinning that down to a list of requirements? And another question that came in is, are you getting the vendor you select to sign off against those requirements? Is that kind of best practice, or what's the best approach there?
Yeah, it is. I mean, there's different views on how useful those requirements are. They're a guide. We use them. We base the requirements on current requirements and also the requirements. We do get the vendors to represent whether their packages support out of the box. There's a customization requirement. There's a third-party add-on. That all helps drive the refinement of the implementation cost. The other important thing is that the requirements do. It's kind of a housekeeping kind of exercise really at the front end of the process to knock out any vendors that have big weaknesses in their product set. So say if you're going pretty broad on your ERP footprint and HR payroll might be in there and one of the vendors just doesn't do that, it's a third-party product. Well, that may be a fatal flaw for that vendor. So you kind of knock them out. It's a question further on actually around the requirements, but what we like to do is get those representations and factor those into the contracts so that they can be referred to during the implementation. But bear in mind the requirements are written at a certain level of detail. They're like what the system does. Yes, it may do it, but it's how the system does it when you get into the design that may be different to your expectations.
Yeah, great. Barry, any further thoughts elaborating on Jamin's points?
Yeah, I very much agree with the information that Jamin's provided, but I would like to emphasise one additional component. We've done many selections for organisations, and we always emphasise to our clients that you're not just buying software, but you're buying a long-term relationship with a vendor. The vendor's going to come in, be part of your business for usually up to about 12 months during implementation, and then we'll continue to provide ongoing support for this application for its lifetime. It's absolutely essential that the dynamics between the vendor organisation and the client organisation are going to work, and although we place a lot of emphasis on ensuring that we get the right software solution, we put as much emphasis on ensuring that we're going to get a good relationship with the vendor and one that's going to be supportive ongoing.
And I'm not quite sure how to put this, but often it's the sales role that's fronting that relationship, but not necessarily they're not necessarily closely involved with delivery of the solution or follow through on support or being up in the middle of the night when things go wrong. How do you get past that?
We get around this problem. Obviously the salespeople are involved, particularly in the front end of the process. When it comes to doing the product demonstrations, which is a pre-sales or a pre-purchase activity, we insist on the fact that the presentations are provided by the consulting staff that would be involved in the implementation. Yeah. So we get to see the staff that are going to be involved, and we get the opportunity to have a coffee and a scone with them at morning tea and get to understand their as people and just see whether or not there's a good mix there.
Yeah, so there's clearly there's using the leverage that you've got in those early phases to get some of the outcomes that mean that you get to have that contact time with the people who are going to count. Seems to be the theme that's coming through there. Greg, any thoughts from your perspective?
I mean, Joan and Barry covered them pretty well, and conscious of time, but I re-emphasise a couple of things from Joan. The requirements thing, it's ongoing and it sort of develops. I like the could be, and that's sort of what you have to sign off with the vendor. And so Barry's point about it's a long-term relationship, you have to be really comfortable with the vendor, and also meet their support people and process before you sign as well. Because that has been an issue on a number of things. Sort of well after the implementation team leave, there's it's a long-term relationship, so be wary.
Yeah, great. Okay. Yep.
Hayden, sorry, before you jump on, I just want to just chat about one thing that Barry mentioned about getting the consultants in early. I don't think there's not really an answer to this, because if you get the consultants in, sometimes they're not the best presenters and they may not show the product in the best light. So, if you get the sales guys, the slick sales guys, well, okay, they may be slick and they do this day in, day out, and some vendors just may win it on the back of slick presenters. But in our experience, it's hard to get the right mix. Maybe it's a mix of both that you need to have going forward.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Look, so I've got that slide of yours, Jamin. Do you want to just talk to that briefly, or?
Sure. Okay. So effectively, well, it's a bit jumbled on my screen. Can you see that properly?
Yeah, it's probably. Yeah. Don't know what's going on with this presentation, but yeah, I can see that it's untidy. Let's flag it, eh?
Yeah, don't worry about it. We've talked to a lot of it already.
Okay. Yep. Good. Okay. So next up, looking at the good old cloud, which generates quite a lot of noise, but is obviously going to be a significant consideration from anyone going into the process of whether they deploy on the cloud. What does that deployment actually look like? Is it just hosting in the cloud, or is it a fully web browser-based software as a service? All of those considerations. Barry, do you want to talk through the approach to take on that one?
Okay, so this is obviously a hot topic for the moment, and there are many people with many views on this one. Look, based on our experience here in New Zealand, there are very few vendors who are currently offering what we would consider to be a full cloud-based ERP solution. There are many vendors who are offering what is effectively a hosted solution, but it's not full cloud. We are aware that many vendors are working towards providing a full cloud solution, which raises, I think, the first question is that when a vendor comes to you and says, we can provide you with a cloud-based solution, the first question is, what are you actually providing? Are you providing a hosted solution of your current software, or are you providing us access to another application which is being written specifically for cloud deployment? And if it's the second, has that application been tested and where else is it being used? So I think it's first of all just checking exactly what it is that the vendor is offering, how mature it is, and what is the model. The second thing I think you need to be aware of when you're looking at cloud solutions is that from a cost perspective, they're very, very different models. The traditional approach to implementing software is usually heavily capital intensive up front, and then has an ongoing maintenance cost, usually somewhere around 20% per annum going forward. Whereas the cloud model is one where you are effectively entering into something that's similar to a lease, and those costs will continue for as long as you use the software. Now, at some point in time in the life of the solution, the cloud-based costing model becomes considerably more expensive than the traditional model, as you are paying a higher rate on an ongoing basis. So I think these are two key considerations in our mind as to what you're actually looking at. And then of course you start to get into the other discussion topics about, what's the response time on it, where's the data being held, what's the security, how do we do our business continuity planning, what's the stability of the vendor, because if the vendor were to go under, you'd obviously be in a difficult situation in terms of gaining access to your software and your data. So that's just a few ideas out there on the table, but in our view the first thing is understand what it is that's being offered, and then understand what the different pricing models are, and if you're comfortable with those, then start a discussion about the other factors that contribute to the cloud risk.
Yeah, okay. Barry, just one thing, your audio is just a little bit sort of fade in, fade out, so maybe if you can just, if I don't know what's going on there, but maybe just try and keep close to your mic. Jamin, you seeing some movement in the number of options that are I guess the web-based software as a service browser solutions and people making those selections? Is it becoming a more comfortable decision?
I think they're being considered alongside on-premise solutions. So on the ERP side of things, generally for smaller businesses, it does make sense. Larger ones tend to like to have the control and keep it on-premise. They may have much more complex integration requirements. But certainly at the smaller end, we've helped a business implement a leading ERP cloud solution. It was really quite painless, actually, in terms of the deployment. No technical setup, which is often a little bit of a problem. And the deployment itself was really quite easy, and that client's still liking that product a lot. In terms of peripheral packages like CRM and particularly around HR, definitely seeing a big take-up in cloud solutions bolted onto on-premise.
Yeah. Okay. Excellent. Right, we'll move on through into the next question then. Where are we? Okay, planning for current needs. I'll just want to, Jamin, you seem to be getting a good voice today, but that's fine. Planning for current needs and future requirements. How far ahead should you be looking when selecting an ERP system? What sort of horizons should you be looking forward to?
As far out as you can, quite frankly. I think it's worthwhile defining your requirements and future state processes as broadly as you can. That's really how you want to operate, not how you are operating today. So really those requirements need to be defined and prioritised, and really the prioritisation determines, I suppose, what you're going to implement initially, or maybe a differentiator for the business. And you might just say, look, we've got a CRM system, it's okay, I just want to have a look at what the ERP does, to have it all integrated. You may not want to implement it, so or you may have another module that's just something into the future. It's not relevant for right now, but I think you should look at it as part of your decision-making process to kind of making it as informed decision as possible up front to future-proof your program. I would, in terms of the other the requirements, get the vendors to respond. Just be wary they may not always be completely accurate. There's differing kind of levels of quality and responses. To mitigate this, state in your RFP responses that that they'll be included in contracts and referred to during implementations to try and get a more accurate view. But I would say definitely look at future as well. Doesn't necessarily have to be what you implement initially.
Yeah, it's always interesting looking at American contracts with these forward-looking statements where they provide lots of wriggle room for future state promises. It's a big cop-out generally.
Don't unless it's generally available, don't consider it.
Yeah, excellent. Guys, any other comments on this one?
Well, I think just picking up on that last comment, we're in a couple of very large selection processes at the moment where we have vendors advising us that the next release will have this and the next release will have that. Our experience is that we don't bank that, to be honest. Unless you can see it and touch it, then it's not real.
Yeah,
agree.
Okay, excellent. Greg, you got a comment there?
I was just going to say the next release always has the things that you need.
That's for sure.
All right, Greg.
Yeah,
so
strange thing, isn't it?
Yeah. Moving on to implementation, and you've been through your business case, you've got your project plans, the requirements are all signed off, you've got a partner in place, and you want to crack into implementing the system. What are the key factors that get you off on the right track and steady as you sail through it? Greg.
And again, there's lots of white papers on this, so I'm just talking from experience. My best implementations have always been when both the team and the organisation understand their processes fully, and they understand where they're at, they understand warts and alls, they understand the rogues and raiders, if in some manufacturing speak. You know, the 4%ers that take all the time when they occur. They understand, you know, how to deal with them, and so going back again, it's mapping the as is time well spent, because you can address those outliers that occur. Because if you don't, and you've implemented your system, then you start to understand how much time these things can take. You know, trying to get workarounds, you know, in an already running system is difficult. So, and also if you do take that time, then the as is or the processes that you need to move to are much more visible and accessible, and so you spend a lot less time trying to get to them. And when you go out, people invariably want to tell you how the process should be. You have to really winkle out of them how it actually is. So, you know, you do need to spend a little bit of time, because otherwise, you know, the system that you design won't be able to address that. So, and in doing this process mapping, that also helps you visualise and manage the scope of the project, which is, again, if you read the papers, that's one of the big things for cost blowouts, not managing scope. If your scope's visible and you can see it, then it's fairly clear when you're working outside those processes. So, so I've found again recently that that using a good mapping tool that people can see and understand is a huge benefit to a successful implementation. Because if you're going to change the way people work, if they can't see it, understand it, and agree to it, then you've got difficulty, and we'll probably talk again about that when we get down to change management. So you've got to make it as easy as you can for the people. So that, that if you're going to do any one thing, it's understand process. The rest of it is in the white papers.
Yeah, great. Guys, any other comments on that visibility of your scope and using process?
I think Greg's picked up on a good point. Definitely understanding what your future state business processes are and what you're trying to achieve in the project is certainly key to success. I think the other factor that you need to have there is the buy-in of the people that are going to be involved in the project team to deliver those processes as they were designed. So it's about having a level of commitment to that level of change within the organisation itself.
Yeah, one that jumped out at me, Greg, was your comment. Sorry, just your comment that really make sure that the processes you've worked on are reflecting how things actually work, because often people get caught up in this. It seems to be a surreal process, but they need to be very open about how they actually do things on a day-to-day basis. Otherwise, if that doesn't come out of the project, then you're going to deliver a project that's not going to support the business. Sorry, Jamin, carry on.
Yeah, I know that was me jumping back in.
Sorry, Greg.
Sorry, yeah, because if you do take that time, then the other things that are really important in implementation, like top management really understanding what the objectives are and what you're trying to achieve will come from that. Getting people involved in defining those processes will that gets you buy-in and people understand what they need to do in the new regime. So get them involved in testing, but this is all about them understanding the process. Then you get the super users to train the end users and support, but it all comes from understanding process. So.
Yep. Okay, excellent. Rattling through time, so let's just move to this next one. Should be a very easy answer from the panel today. And I think who have we assigned this one to? Barry. The benefits of engaging an outside consultant or project manager. We've already touched on it, so just a brief one probably.
Yeah, I think various aspects of this have been discussed, but if you want a word, it's about de-risking the project. You're engaging somebody right from the outset that has a well understood process to get you from the current state through to selecting a vendor and then implementing an ERP solution. the vendor understands the your consultant should understand the product, should understand the market, but should also be able to contribute to designing the solution. So we're going back to business process here, and when an organisation is thinking about how they can solve a problem, the consultant should be able to bring his or her experience to the table and say, look, I've seen this issue before, here are some alternative ways of getting this business process to work, and this is how you can leverage the technology to automate it or to get a better level of process design. So right from the outset, your consultant should be able to add value, but at the end of the day, it's about minimising the risk and getting a better outcome for the client.
Absolutely. Any other points to add, guys?
I'd just like to add a couple. Completely around de-risking the project. I think the expertise is also around managing the vendor effectively, particularly if things start to go a little bit wrong. If someone's been through these exercises plenty of times, there are certain levers that you can pull and certain triggers along the way that you need to act. And I think that comes with experience and how to deal with it and how to get it back on track.
Yep, definitely agree. Vendor management's very key.
Yep. Okay, excellent. Let's just click through onto the other one. Now, next question for Jamin again. Do you have any tips on managing company resources during an implementation?
Get the best people on the project. I think that message has come through loud and clear today. And don't start. Essentially, if you don't have the best people, don't start. Don't accept people that maybe on special projects or less busy around the organisation that can be allocated. Get the best people. It should hurt the business to put the best people on the project, but you'll get the best outcomes. Get a backfill budget in the initial business case we've talked about so that the team leads, power users can be on the project. Again, doing both project work and BAU, business as usual, activities doesn't really produce the optimal outcomes. So try and get people devoted to the project. Early on in analysis design, you may have them kind of half-time. It doesn't necessarily need to be full-time, but it definitely ramps up during build and test and train and so on. In terms of managing company resources, you may want to incentivise. I think it's been highlighted today that these exercises are pretty arduous, not terribly fun, so you may want to incentivise some or all of the roles. Communicate responsibilities and expected effort for the people at different stages of the project clearly early on in the charter. You need to provide context for the overall project for the people, but really focus on the activities for the stage ahead. And finally, just usually the company resources that are allocated to a project, if we're involved, we're taking sort of project management, change management kind of responsibility. It's the functional experts that come from the business. They need to work really closely with the with the ERP consultants. So you really want to sit them together to get the best results so that knowledge is transferred and you become self-sufficient as an organisation early on in the process, so you're not reliant on them at the back end of the process and after go live.
Excellent. Guys, any other thoughts on this one? I'm just working through a bunch of questions here that we haven't allowed time for, so I'm just a little bit distracted.
Yeah, I'll just add one quick comment in there. I totally agree with the comments that Jamin have made. One thing that you should consider is that these ERP implementations do take a long time, and I think it's important to identify key components or key deliverables in the project where you can celebrate some success, just to keep the motivation up and then keep people focused on what they're doing.
Yep, excellent.
Go-karting's really good.
Yeah, totally agree.
Okay, one last question, and there's a bunch of questions. I think we probably have addressed most of them, but there's a couple in there that I'll pick out. But there's one more for you guys to talk to. Greg, do you want to take this one, just from a broader perspective on organisation and change management? I suppose is what is commonly tagged with this one. The approaches to go with.
Yeah. One CEO described it to me after implementation as ERP implementation is like open heart surgery for the business. We had to do it, otherwise we would have not been very well. and we weren't well for some time after. But in the longer term, it's better for us, and that's probably a fair analogy. But it doesn't have to be as bad as what it could be, because some of the things I think you need to concentrate on is making sure that the original scope that you strive for is manageable and not too ambitious. You have to achieve it, and if you're too ambitious, you'll struggle, and things will become nasty. The other thing is making sure that the stakeholders and the employees understand the need and the benefits, and it's sort of quite difficult to get that message through. So it needs to be very clear and concise and consistent message, and use whatever the common media is in your company. Whether it's blogs on the portal or standing around the coffee machine. Get involved and keep the message flowing. So that has to be a fairly consistent thing. And I go back to making it all visible as you can, so that people understand the processes that will be impacted and how they change and what the new world looks like. If you can convey that, then you'll do it pretty well. And I'll take Barry's point is not just the project team, the people, the stakeholders involved in any deliverable or milestone, need to celebrate it in some way. So that's the short version.
All right, guys, any further to add to that?
Just one thing around change managers. Typically, an organisation doesn't have an experienced change managers been through ERP projects before. Definitely encourage people to look external for someone that's been through it plenty of times before. They've got the methodologies in place and the tools and tricks along the way that will help your users go from where you are now to future state.
Is that a role all the way through, Jamin, do you think? Or come in at the end?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No. It's from the start. They need to understand. They need to get the best change managers need to understand the processes up front and how they're changing and the impact on individual people in the business. So it's all the way through. It's not at the end. They're not trainers. People get confused between change management and training. It's that change managers typically don't train. They may help in terms of training needs analysis and working with the vendor to do the curriculum or internal people to do the curriculum. But from the start, understanding the processes up front and all the way through.
Totally agree. We consider that this role is so important that we always place our change managers on the steering committee, so they have an active voice right at the top of the project.
Yeah.
And are they aligned with the HR function or just senior management?
No, a lot of people confuse change management as being some type of HR role. It's a little bit beyond that, and again, going back to the comment I think that Jamin made, that understanding the change process around an ERP implementation is quite different from just a general change management role.
And typically, we find HR people aren't good change managers. They may be given that responsibility, but they just don't have the experience and the tools to do it properly.
I was probably thinking that, but I wasn't going to say it in case there was HR people in the audience.
HR people are great. They know their area. They know the functional side of things, but it's just change management. It's a different discipline, isn't it?
Okay, no dispersions to our HR.
Agreed.
I have clients. I have clients that are have got HR systems, so I need to be aware of that. Now, look, I'm trying to find a question that in the time that we've got, there's kind of a summary, but it's a tricky one. There's one there that's kind of as if there was a benchmark of what it costs to implement an ERP system from woe to go as a percentage of turnover. Is there anything you can kind of, thoughts or rules of thumb, guys, in terms of, the scope of what these things take?
My own personal view on this is I think that it's a benchmark that's overused and that's very inaccurate. You can have a very, very large organisation that will implement an ERP solution for a fraction of the cost of, on a percentage basis, of a smaller organisation.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's a good way to try and measure what it's going to cost.
I mean, I think the resounding message all through is it really comes down to the detail being done and the work, the hard yards being done, and understanding your processes and where you want to take them, and where a system is going to solve those problems versus the way your organisation approaches problems is vital, really. And then visibility is the other theme that's come through for me, is that the whole organisation understands the pain that it's going to be put through, is being put through, or has been put through, and everyone can appreciate how hard it has been, and buy into the end game rather than making the sniping comments along the way, either being too involved or not involved enough. But fantastic, guys. I think some excellent responses to questions today. I would like to go through all of these individually, and I will have a read through them in more detail and see if there's specific ones we can address to the individuals. But I think overall some really valuable contribution from you all. I'm going to skip through the Q&A because I ran out of time and didn't do the facilitator's job that I promised, but hopefully of value to everyone in the audience. I will send out the presentation, which was a bit skewy to everyone, and as I say, you'll get the recording of the whole thing, so hopefully the audio is clean and you can work through the presentation and make some sense of those Dilbert cartoons. There is, just as you leave the webinar today, there's a exit survey that pops up. In there's a white paper that Epicore's put up on specifically selecting and implementing ERP solutions. Top of my mind, I can't remember what the name of it is, but it was a good one, on specifically based on Australian empirical data from people who have been there, done that. So just say yes to that, and there's a few other questions there that we do appreciate you answering. Thanks, yes, to our sponsor today, Epicore. Epicore are a little bit unique in that they are not only the vendor, but they also are the implementation party, so they'll be partner with their clients to implement the solution right through to support an ongoing relationship there, rather than working through a third party. Probably could have been another question to put to the panel as whether that's a good model, but that's how Epicore works. They've got about 20,000 customers across 150 countries, so they're a sizable player in the ERP space, particularly in 5 key industries: manufacturing, distribution, retail, hospitality and services. So that's pretty much it from me today. Thank you very much, panelists. Really appreciate your time and contribution. Keep an eye out on email for the next round of Lunchbox webinars. Otherwise, that's it from me today. Thank you, Barry, Greg and Jamon. Cheers, guys. Thanks, audience.
Thanks, Hayden.
Thanks, Rod. Cheers.
Cheers.